Hello, I'm Toycat, and the rise of Donald Trump in America, not just to the presidency for the second time, but also to headlines all across the English-speaking world, raises an interesting question, which is why has the rest of the Anglosphere not gone through something similar? Why is it that we don't see a huge right-wing surge in Canada, the United Kingdom, or Australia, and why is it that this is a relatively isolated movement when usually these sorts of things go across international borders? Well, let's discuss that very interesting question in today's video, starting with the Canadian situation, because Canada is one of the biggest target of Trump tariffs, and you can see this quite clearly when we look at their voting intention polls, where you can see that they went from having a huge lead for their Conservative Party. Again, if you're from the United States, you might say, oh, the Red Party, they're leading. That means there is a right-wing surge. But in most of the world, red means left-leaning, blue means right-leaning. The United States used to flip every single election, but then in 2000 they got stuck the wrong way because people were looking too much. It's a really fun story about the weird way that the Hung presidency led to basically the parties getting stuck in the wrong way there. But in the rest of the world, blue means conservatives, and the conservatives went from sweeping Canada to potentially winning every single province to actually, oh yeah, now they are second, and they probably won't win unless something drastic changes or unless the polls are wrong, right? And so what has led to this? The simplest answer: Trump's tariffs. Trump has the traditional right-wing stance has been one of basically cooperation with other countries. Free trade has been proven to be beneficial for both sides. In the overwhelming majority of cases, any net loss that you have is massively offset by the gains, which is why when you have a right-wing president or prime minister, you can have the exact opposite. Reagan and Thatcher were both two very, again, to lots of right-wing leaders across the world, including right now, were two leaders that you would look at and say, oh, that is a policy we can have, whereas looking at the United States' current policy will make you really clearly realize it's not one you can have, because effectively the right-wing response on trade should be, we will open up trade and do the best we can, whereas it's a bit more of a traditionally left-wing stance to be more protectionist. And right now, protectionism is the only way you can respond to a blanket 25% tariff on goods coming from your country to your biggest trade partner. And so what's interesting is during the debate that they just had in Canada, it came up that, yeah, their goal was to go dollar for dollar on tariffs, but they've realized that doesn't work. So now they've had to work out how to cause the most pain to the US without causing the most pain to themselves. In other words, they're in a full-blown trade war, and the only way to describe your response in a trade war, no matter what it is protectionism, right? Or doing nothing, I guess you could say, as the second response, and neither of those are great things, leading to a huge surge in the left-leaning party over the right one, as people start to think that that is a better solution. Whether they're right or wrong is, I guess, entirely up to you. But what's interesting about this is if we look at Australia, the same thing has happened there. The Liberal National Coalition, which, again, it's fun that they're called the Liberal Party in Australia. I would argue Liberal is a right-leaning stance, and that leaving people alone is the goal for right-leaning parties, but whatever. The interesting thing here is if we look at Australia, they had this huge rise in their right-leaning party that kind of coincided with the rise of Trump, you could say, but as soon as Trump got into office, the exact opposite has occurred. I think that, and if we look at, this is across all of the parties, including the Greens, which have a solid 10%, if we go down to two-party preferred, you can see that it's gone from the Blue Party just about catching up to the Red Party to now being massively massively defeated, let's be honest. And why is this the case? I think the simplest way we can put it is that, yeah, the right-wing solution basically was to say, let's always cooperate, and now we have what you might describe, I guess if we want to say that the US's politics are so big that they echo out into the world, right now we are seeing a very left-wing response on trade becoming the standard position. If you want to copy the United States, you don't jump right-leaning. You can jump right-leaning on policy issues, on culture war issues, but you've got to jump left-leaning when it comes to trade, because that's the only correct response. I think interestingly, if we look at the UK, you can see this in its sharpest and starkest situation, because if we look at political favorabilities, this is a poll from YouGov that came out literally 2 days ago. Keir Starmer is wildly unpopular as Prime Minister. It looks like we have the first example of a country that is following the US trend, where the right is winning and the left is losing. But actually, even though, in the US, when a president is unfavorable, like the last two are some of the most unpopular presidents the US has had, but they both still sit around 40%, while Keir Starmer, since being elected, has fallen from that 40% down to 28, which is bad, a net favorability of minus 34, But if we look at all of the other senior politicians, Nigel Farage is the second highest at 27. The leader of the Conservatives sits at 16%. And as you can see, there is a really low favourability for basically all major parties. The lowest net favourability is Ed Davey, the centrist Liberal Democrat leader. But the only reason why is because 40% of people don't know who he is, apparently. Similarly of the Carla Denyer, the Green Party leader, just the majority of people do not know who these people are, and that is kind of shocking, right? We basically have two leaders that everyone knows, Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage, who notably doesn't lead the traditional Conservative Party, who came second at the last election, but instead leads the Reform Party, who got 5 seats, and I guess you could say came third at the last election by overall vote share, but, substantially lower by seats. So what's really interesting about this, though, is if we look at polls, it's actually even worse than that. The Labour Party has gone quite far down, and they've been replaced not by the Conservatives, which have seen the same thing as Australia and Canada, where they've gone from a high of 26-ish% all the way down to 22%, but our second right-wing party, Reform, has jumped up too. This is kind of nuts if you look at the way the political situation is in the UK. A centrist party at 15%, another right-wing party at 1%, but then we have two right-wing parties with about 50% between them after that has been taken into account, which is absolutely wild, and we are seeing a huge seismic shift from traditional Conservative to new Conservative. However, this then has the interesting point, because traditional Conservatives would be super pro-free trade. Traditional Conservatives would, broadly speaking, I'm going to really try to simplify the entire left-wing's axis down to one sentence here, would believe that maybe, the government should step out of your way rather than stepping into it, right? That would be a traditional right-wing belief. Whereas if we look at our brand new Reform Party, I have full, just from the vibes of it, I have full belief that everything you look into about Nigel Farage suggests that he is basically an old-school Conservative who believes in low taxes and low government intervention, etc. But the party that he has founded around him, the second party of what it's worth, that UKIP that's scoring 1% of the vote, that's his old party. I don't know how they could. It's a really interesting situation that effectively there is one man who has formed two of the major political parties in the UK. But what's interesting is if you look into the Reform Party that is formed around him, you have a situation where it's like, oh yeah, the party chairman puts out stuff like this all the time. The Reform Party as a whole are not pro-free trade or pro-stepping out people's way. They're pro-culture war issues on the right side of things. So here is, again, this is a poster I saw from the party chairman, and they're like, we are scrapping net zero. And on the surface, that is like, oh, that's good. That's like, you favor the government not telling people how they should run their lives on emissions. And it's like, no, actually, we favor the government telling people more how they should run their life. Windfall tax on renewable power. We want to tax renewable power because how dare they make power for free? A solar farm tax on farmers taking the renewable subsidy. That doesn't make any sense. Just cut out the renewable subsidy. You don't have to tax a subsidy. That doesn't make any sense. That is actively adding bureaucracy for no reason. A ban on battery energy storage systems. Why would you ban that? That is literally, there is no economic or rational, or there is only a culture argument that you're like, yeah, people, these wokos of their batteries are doing, and then legislate to force national grid cables and put them underground. So again, just to be clear here, this is the party, whether it is the individual leading the party or the party which has a popular individual, whatever the case may be. But the second right-leaning party that is more successful in the UK is one that has said, yeah, being right-wing is more of a vibe thing. Being right-wing is saying that you're against the woke and not really clarifying what it is. And this is kind of this is something that I think is legitimately a little distressing, which is why we have this exact split between do you think that conservatives should be about conservatism, or do you think conservatives should be broadly along the lines of the Trump stuff? And weirdly, that second thing will make them the most popular party in the UK. And so what's really interesting is we have a situation where we are about to negotiate a trade deal. The UK is one of the few countries the United States has lined up as saying they are good for a trade deal. They'll make a bunch of points about, actually you've got to repeal hate speech laws if you want to do that. But, in general, the US is coming out and saying we want a deal with the UK, and the UK, rightly so, is saying we want a deal with the US. this is the basics on trade, right? There are three big economies in the world: China, the EU, and the United States, in reverse order of importance. With the EU, we have the closest thing we can have to a great deal without being an EU member. As that is what we're going for right now, okay, that's almost as good as you can get. We should work out some stuff to do with fishing. We should work out, youth mobility and all those sorts of weird parts of a deal. But the UK and the EU, we have great relations. The UK and China, okay, it's a bit of a trickier barrel of fish, but the UK and the US should be on great terms. We buy a bunch of stuff from them. They have a trade deficit. We're not tariffing them about it, but we buy way more from them than they buy from us. But we also sell a bunch of services to them. We're an English-speaking European country. These two continents sell the most between any two continents. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy situation that should be very beneficial to get a trade deal. But despite that, we have all sorts of random culture war issues coming up about it. Again, so one of the examples is that, so British farmers and a lot of people who live in the countryside are like, yeah, a trade deal with the United States wouldn't be good because they want to put hormones in our beef. Right now, you can't put hormones in the beef in the UK, you can in the US, therefore we effectively put an infinity % tariff on their beef, whereas any trade deal would say, okay, let's work out a way to actually resolve that. And I think it's really interesting that people immediately say, no, it's not okay. In the UK, they even make the decent argument here that, like, yeah, American beef farmers need to do what they do because they have a harsher environment, whereas we have a great environment where we just don't have to add very much. And so let's say that there is some really strong scientific or, region, there's some reason that you don't want to have American beef. Bearing in mind that it costs way more. So American beef costs more, and it has things in it that we don't really like, and we label beef, we also label everything. Like, if you buy asparagus at the store, you know exactly where it comes from. I have Spanish asparagus sitting in my fridge right now. But when you buy things from the store, you know exactly where it comes from, and so if American beef with its hormones was so bad, then there's no deal that would make people actually buy it, right? The only argument I can see is if you say, well, what if businesses buy it and then they hide it from consumers? Then we would accidentally eat beef growth hormones, and it's like, well, if we accidentally ate beef growth hormones, not only would we be on the same terms as the US, which, oh no, they're all bad over there, but also like Canada can buy and has the same standards, broadly speaking, for its beef. Is that such a disastrous thing? The answer is, like, not really, actually. If it's more expensive and worse in the eyes of the consumers, then why can't we have free trade? The answer is something about clutching some pearls. Again, there's this weird thing where now right-leaning, this is my biggest bugbear, is rather than having big productive debates about how we should run an economy, should the government be more interventionist, or should they say actually the free markets have worked on a lot of the things that we've put them on? We can have these debates, but instead right-left has become this huge culture shift. Like, again, when talking about a trade deal, the Vice President of the United States says that, yeah, one of the red lines we have in your country about free trade that would benefit us both hugely is hate speech law. So let's just imagine, right, that we have literally no free speech in the UK. That is the argument that the United States makes, that I can't say anything bad without being arrested by the police. Small problem we have, I would say, that I think we've done a good job to fix, but with police coming to people's houses for them saying mean things online was a big problem, right? But let's say we're a totalitarian state. Actually, you can have free trade, and that would be free trade should supersede that. The point of, in my opinion, the way that you be a good neighbor and a good guest is you don't go to your neighbor's house and say, you are living your life's wrong. You say, you're allowed to do what you want inside your house. I'll do what I want inside of mine, but we need to work together to build this driveway that we share. And the same thing is true of free trade. You shouldn't care about the culture issues happening in your neighboring country or your trading country. You shouldn't be worried about weird buzzwords. You should just say it is beneficial to trade. If we sell and buy more things from each other, it is good. Consumers generally, rather than saying the government should decide what people get to buy, I think we should say that people get to decide what to buy. Right now, we've got this argument that, oh yeah, the people who live in this place, the Palace of Westminster, side note, it's on a very busy bike route. I feel like I go past there way too often. But the Palace of Westminster, the people in there should get to decide what it is that I get to buy. Instead, I would like to go to the store and say, yeah, I don't know about hormones. Or if it was so much cheaper, because hormones are so much better in that way, maybe I should say, yeah, actually, I could go have some growth hormones in my beef. Let's see how that is. But instead we say, nope, you are banned. If you want to buy US beef, that is a crime in this country. And the same is true for a lot of things on the vice versa. There's a lot of ways that the US market needs to make sure that it can align to European goods. And is that something that we should do? Yes. Why not? And the answer is because, well, that's not a very fun culture war issue, and that seems to be the way that right and left is defined now. But my final point here is Kanzuk, that's the solution. If we believe that the US cannot be trusted and dealt with, if we believe the US is not someone we should work with, then Kanzuk is the solution. Did you know a majority of Canadians support a Kanzuk free trade deal? Sure, having one country and one economy and one armed forces and one currency is a bit of a stretch. Totally understand that. But having a confederation, or at least an EU-like body where we can have free movement between each other, is a great idea. All of these countries are far apart, but in a world where that's not a problem anymore, Kanzuk is the solution. And every one of these videos I want to end on that point, because ultimately, yeah, I think. I think I'm going to become one of those old school people that's like, yeah, my defining issue in politics today is the 1980s miners' strike. I'm going to be that guy, but in like, in like 20 years, I'll still be like, yeah, but I think that I just want to vote for the free trade person, whoever that is. I want to vote for the person that makes the country wealthier, rather than debating about whether we should tax farmers on their subsidies, or whether we should make electricity underground, because electricity cables that come out of the ground is something to do with net zero for some reason. I don't understand the argument for anything anymore, because I guess maybe no one understands anything anymore. Maybe political literacy is so low that the only way to reach people is to say the buzzwords that they've maybe heard online. And in that way, thank you for watching. Second channel, don't care. Except actually, wait. Look at this. Someone subscribed to the Patreon since last time. But again, you can become a free member. You can literally, you don't have to pay. You look at that, 23 versus 22. You don't have to pay. You can become a free member. I don't know what the benefits are. You can see some stuff there. But thank you for the Patreon cash. You know what I'll do with it? I'll sit here and I'll advocate for why we should all become wealthier, while becoming wealthier off the back of your kind contributions. My personal little chest of lobster rolls and kebabs. Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. I'm just kidding. Second channel. Don't care. Good. Bye. Oh, that's interesting, huh? That's a big crab. Anyway, see you.